right. Good morning, everyone. This is Kenneth Giri again on Enyinaya Africa. Today, I'm going to do something very special. I'm going to be talking to Treasure Enyinaya David. And I'm going to be talking to him about three things. And I want to take a look at these fantastic websites. The first one is the Africa SME Assembly website. Africa SME Assembly happening on October 9th in Lagos. I was at the first one. I wasn't at the second one. And I wish I could be at the third one. But I'll tell you about that later. But fantastic journey that Treasure has taken so far. He's also beginning to build Verific, which basically authenticates and verifies entrepreneurs. If you want to enter into that community where people are sure what you do, who you are, you want to check it out. So check this out. And finally, the guy that is building these websites can make your website look like this as well. So I want you to think about how you want your next landing page to look like. So let me stop sharing that and let's come over to the screen with Treasure Enyinaya David. So let me start by saying, who are you and how far have you come?
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much for having me here at Anthony. To me, I think I'm always excited whenever I get, whenever I have the opportunity to speak with you and also to share my journey as well. And I want to say a very big thank you to you, sir. You've been instrumental to my growth in the last 3 years of knowing you. I have never had a time where I have regretted any engagement. I've always had a better outcome anytime I have engagement with you. So personally, Treasure Enyinaya David, firstly, I'm a Pan-African born in Nigeria. And I say it very clearly because I'm not that one person that secludes myself from the rest of Africa. I am an African and I identify as an African. I was born in Nigeria, but I have an African origin. That's who I am. And I'm privileged to be the convener of the Africa SME Assembly and a product called Verific and the African Business Accelerator as well. All of it are intertwined with each other, right? The goal is to create an ecosystem where SMEs across the continent would can assess the right resources, the right partnership, the right collaboration, the right opportunities that is needed to scale their business, right? Why are SMEs important? For us, we have identified the role that SMEs across the continent play towards the sustainable development of the continent. And we cannot underestimate that role, right? And what we've done is, how do we actively play to enhance that role? How do we support businesses to come into the fullness of the responsibilities placed on them by the ecosystem, by their countries and by Africa at large, right? And so that's something that makes us very different, right? We're a social enterprise, we're an economic support organization, entrepreneurship support organization. We like Mr. Kenneth have said, we have the Verific, which I happen to be the CEO of Verific. Verific is a virtual deal room. The goal is we discover that SMEs, there's a lot of financial gap across the continent. Currently, the World Bank projected over 330 billion of credit gap that SMEs are in Africa currently missing. So what it means is there's a bridge between how SMEs raise funds and the access of funds in itself, right? So there's money coming into the continent, but very few businesses are well positioned to receive that fund. And that's exactly why we're building Verific, right? So Verific basically aims to enable SMEs create what we call a deal room, right? Because digital money engagement has increased lately, and a lot of funders are looking for virtual a system to do proper due diligence, right? And we discovered that due diligence process that these venture investors, funders do, right, sort of takes quite a lot of the time that it's needed to enable businesses to finally land their first or second or third raise, right? So fundraising is a key and instrumental part of business development, but then a lot of businesses struggle with it, right? Because they have very scattered documents. So what we've done with Verotic is to bring that document to a single point, create a virtual deal room where we verified with real analysts, where investors can walk in and have a single source of truth to begin their due diligence on businesses. This way, the goal is to reduce the timeline it takes to raise funding. So for instance, if you take 8 weeks to 14 weeks, actually, that's the timeline that currently we see across the continent to do proper due diligence. We want to reduce that to 2 weeks so that it's faster to raise funding, it's faster to do due diligence, it's faster to close as well. That's basically this problem we're solving, right? And so far, I have, focused on supporting businesses in any way possible, with my skills and with also my experience as well. And that's why I and my friend pushed out Paid Media. The goal of Paid Media is simply just to support businesses that need some infrastructure, and enable them to, leverage our skills to get that infrastructure. And because we're in a digital age, right, a lot of business owners struggle with things like as simple as a website, web graphic design, technical support. These are things that they need help in. Right. So what we've done is to create that avenue where they can get it with ease, and they can also, at a very affordable cost as well. So yes, that's me. That's what I do. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you, Treasure. I think we learned a little more about what you do, and we'd like also learn to who you are. But one of the things that intrigues me about your work is the specific way in which you use terms, deal room, due diligence, SMEs, the statistics around from 8 to 14 weeks to 2 weeks. All that detail. Tell us a little bit about how you came about this level of expertise in the space, in the development space, in the entrepreneurship space, etc.
Thank you so much, sir. All right. So, firstly, it's been an interesting journey. I didn't just come out to be this, right? It started with a lot of learning, a lot of failures. I kicked off my entrepreneurial journey way back at, as early as 2016, 2017. That's about almost a decade now, right? However, it was, I was privileged to also work in development spaces as well. I was once the senior program officer for an NGO, right, that worked with the French embassy in Nigeria, right. I was actively involved in creating solutions for businesses. During that period, I trained over 900 businesses across various regions, right, and that experience opened me up to the terminologies of this industry. Being in a social enterprise ecosystem, you have to understand what to say, when to say it, what details data means, and so for me that was the beginning, right? However, I've come to grow into it, right? I wasn't, my terminologies weren't this smooth 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago. I know, sir, you met me at certain points where I wasn't like this experienced or probably this exposed. But I think for me, what has helped me is the growth mindset that I have. I did not stop at just being where I am. I'm betting you that if you meet me 2 years from now, I will not be like this. If you meet me 1 year from now, I would not be like this. I will be better than this, right? Because I have chosen to approach life as a journey, right? I move from one point to another point every single time. So I don't just jump into things. I don't just speak anyhow, right? I'm learning how to communicate clearly as well. So, and in a space like ours, you are dealing with businesses that to a large extent needs clarity. And I had to learn how to be clear with numbers, learn how to be clear with impact as well, outcomes, because that's the best way to make them see how relevant what you're building is. and how they can adopt it as well. So yeah, I think that's what my journey looks like. I personally did not I had to take some courses. I'm still taking some courses to now, but however, there are some courses that really cost tangible change in my life, and I'll keep saying it, is the ideation section I had with you, right? I don't know, for those listening to me, I'll be honest with you. If you've not had the privilege to take the ideation section, thinking of the first I think it's IIS, interactive ideation section. Yes, thank you. Yes. So if you've not had the time to take that section, to a large extent, most likely be blunt with some of the outcomes, like, because what with the interactive ideation section did for me was to clearly show me the value, because we had a lot of engagement with understanding your business, understanding your value proposition canvas, which was very solid, because this way I was able to capture the inputs we are making and what the outcome of that input could be, and map it to to input and output. It made the communication easier for me, right? And that was, to me, the first step towards clarity and being able to communicate like this, And so I think that's it. Thank you so much, Stan.
Fantastic. I like your mention of the interactive ideation session, and we'll probably talk about that a bit deeper down the line. But you started with something very profound, a growth mindset. And I might add some two other interesting words: bootstrapping, resilience. Yeah. And I think these are very important words for the African entrepreneur, because our environment does not always lend itself to supporting us as much as we would love to be supported. Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with one of our participants in the IIS some time ago. That was probably 2 years ago, where he said that he was actually pursuing a $27,000 grant from his government in Ireland. So he's a Nigerian living in Ireland, and he was trying to start a health company, and they had such funds for SMEs that you could easily get. They were just looking for people who are interested in this. Right. Wow. So I like that some governments make those provisions to support SMEs, and I'm glad that with your effort and with the likes of Smedan and all that, probably that is also brewing in Nigeria. But tell us a bit about these terms I've mentioned, the growth mindset, bootstrapping, resilience. What does it mean to you personally, and how do you think it's helpful to embrace these philosophies for the emerging entrepreneur?
Okay. Firstly, thank you so much for that question. That's a very important question, especially for entrepreneurs here in Africa. You see, having a growth mindset is one of the most important, I would say, arguably the most important character traits, should be the most important character trait of an entrepreneur that wants to succeed in an environment like Africa, right? The thing is, a lot of things are evolving. Life is moving, right? And what we know today may not be relevant tomorrow, right? How we approach our activities today may not be relevant tomorrow. And it's necessary as an entrepreneur to see themselves as individuals that is in a journey towards mastery, towards growth, right? And that's where the growth mindset comes in. Because entrepreneurs, those who see their life as a journey, would always approach life from a learning point perspective, right? So you could be doing something in a certain way and it works for you for a time, but because you have a growth mindset, you can observe what is prevalent now and how it's working, and then ask yourself, what do I need to learn? Who do I need to know? What do I need to read? What do I need to capture to help me to help me to move past where I am currently to where I ought to be? And to me, that's very important as an entrepreneur. You must have that mindset of growth. And that's where the growth mindset comes in. The opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. Someone who believes it's like this and it has to be like this. No, right? For instance, during our section yesterday at the African Business Accelerator, that's our final week 3 section. Someone said something that was really profound. You're dealing, for instance, in 2010, the employees are different from the employees in 2026. 2010 to 2026 is 26 years. Right? Is it 26? 16 years.
16 years, yeah.
16 years, right? It's 16 years. And 16 years ago, the way we approach entrepreneurs, the way we approach employees, right, is different. So if you're not someone that has a growth mindset, in 2026, you're most likely dealing with Gen Zs, you're dealing with social media, you'll be dealing with a lot of things that is unconventional with what happened in 2010, or even say 2000, right? The approach to which you engage with your employees, for instance, will be very different. If you look at it, the way you even do business in 2010 is far different from the way you do business in 2026. And how to catch up or how to keep being relevant is to have a mindset of growth where you know that we are doing this like this, is working for us today. There's a potential that it may not work for us tomorrow. So how do we keep ourselves up to date to ensure that we don't lose out on the changes, or we are not left out, or we are not outrun by the innovation that is coming in, in the continent? That's very important, and that's why the growth mindset is important. The second you said is bootstrapping. You see, you said something earlier, someone who had access to over, $22,000 to start up, right? It's easy in Africa, you hardly see such opportunities. It's very rare for you to see government that has kept funds somewhere and waiting for, someone who has a viable business idea to come in and take it. It's a rare case, right? What you see in Africa is people who have to validate an idea, prove that it works, and position it rightly with relationship to ensure that you can actually raise funding. So it's different. So it means before you can raise funding, you should have done some work behind the scene on your own first. Now, what that means is, to a large extent, it's either you're building the skill sets to execute without external support, or you are finding a way to give value to an employee without having to pay a large sum for their services, right? But the goal is that you have to find a way to keep moving, irrespective of the financial limitations that you're currently faced with. And for me, how I navigated through that part was I started learning skills. So I learned how to do a lot of things that I normally would have paid for. And because I had a marketing background, I usually think of the easiest entry point to any product. How do I enter this market without having to spend so much, right? Without having to spend so much on, on payments, on doing this, and all of that, right? Now, for me as well, there's a lot of experiences I've also had that has helped me. I'm a Christian, so I have a lot of belief in God's word, and so it has always been a faith journey as well. So bootstrapping is, I trust God for this, but I'm moving, believing that need will be met irrespective of the limitation, right? And to me, I think bootstrapping should be embraced. It shouldn't be. It should be embraced because, for me, one thing it does also is it builds a thick skin for the entrepreneur. You build a thick skin. For instance, in my first assembly, I applied 68 times. I applied to 68 organizations, and wow. I got rejected. So you were one of the few persons that you actually had told us no initially. I don't know if you remembered. You mentioned that you're not going to invest. So you're one of the 68 I had applied to, and later by the grace of God, you supported us in the way you and which we honestly appreciate to date, right? But we had a ton of rejections, and then I also had to use limited resources to move, right? We moved, and then the next year we had even a better outcome. But we still had rejection, no doubt, but we had better outcomes. So every year we kept having better outcomes. But I didn't stay at that point. I kept moving. However, what happened to me was I became tougher. I became more resilient. I became more committed to what I'm supposed to do. So if someone tells me no, I shake your hands. I tell you thank you. I'll keep in touch with you. We'll meet again. So for instance, I always give this instance. There is an organization that rejected us three times in 2 years. And the fourth time we reached out to them, they invested into our business, right? They invested into our event. So I've discovered that sometimes that brings me to resilience, right? Sometimes it's not even you may not have a yes now, does not mean you will not have it tomorrow, right? Someone saying no to you today does not mean the person would say no to you tomorrow. It may not just be the right time today. Today may just, they may have had a lot of engagement or a lot of commitment already that today was not it. Tomorrow could be it. But ability to stay true with the vision and commit yourself to it, irrespective of that rejection, is called resilience, right? Is that, see, this thing will not stop me. I will find a way to make this thing work, irrespective of your rejection. That's it, sir.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. I used to say that focus is the first law of success. Nobody will take you more seriously than you take yourself. So I think, Ted, you took yourself seriously and you kept, knocking on doors. And that is why those who previously said next door, to you, it was next opportunity. And you were able to that I really, really, that's really, really amazing. That's really, really awesome that you're able to navigate, to understand that you can actually start small and win big. You can start small and win big. It's always a journey. I want to switch a little bit and maybe put you on the spot a bit about. I recall you in your speech. You mentioned that, of course, you said you've applied to 68, made 68 applications for funds. Talked about the fact that in our part of the world, it's not that easy to get funding. You also mentioned something interesting, that sometimes even relationships have to be involved in getting the funding. It's not as simple as, I know what I'm doing a great job, therefore I'll get funding. And of course, it's a risky environment to invest in. So tell us a little bit about your journey to Kenya to seek funding and what you learned about how these things work in real life.
Okay, that's an interesting experience that I had in when you kick off your fundraising journey, right, of which I've not even achieved it yet. We are still in the journey, right? But we one of the things I have discovered is, again, a man that keeps knocking on the door, no matter how hard the door is, as long as it keeps knocking, we eventually find I won't say luck, we eventually have that door open one day. Someone will get tired of listening to his knock and eventually open the door for him and ask him, what does he need, right? And I think that was what happened to me. I was looking for opportunities. I kept knocking at doors, and eventually we had a trip. We had an opportunity to be in Kenya. We were invited by the AFTS to be in Kenya. Honestly, we didn't have the money to go to Kenya. I'll be honest with you. And then I didn't even have a passport. And it was interesting because this was an opportunity to pitch to the investors that we think would invest into our business. However, we then discover that it's not that cheap. You have to pay to a certain degree to be there. And by virtue of resilience as well, and God's mercy and grace, I'll be honest with you, God showed us His mercy, and He supplied from a very unlikely source. We were able to pay for our flight tickets, we were able to get an accommodation, and we were able to travel to Kenya. But the interesting part of that journey is that we went to Kenya. We pitched at Kenya. At the event, we were 16th out of 20 businesses. So we didn't even get anything there. We didn't actually get the cash, the top prize. We didn't get anything. We just came to pitch. But you see, something happened to me in that room, right? Something different happened to me. I saw possibilities. I saw how an event is organized, one. I saw outcomes. I saw opportunities. I saw people who had built solutions. I saw people who had created systems to support the continent. And then, interestingly, one of our sponsors today, we met them in Kenya, and I had just one week there, one relationship. And for me, the outcome of that trip wasn't the pitching, wasn't the investment that we didn't get. It wasn't even about investment. It was about the exposure that opportunity brought to me. And every single day, I thank God for that trip, right? I was privileged to walk around the street of Kenya, Nairobi. I was privileged to go into places that probably would not have gotten to in years. Had some tours, met some people, and my eyes were open. I saw things, I saw possibilities. Interestingly, I went to Kenya with very little financial support. Like, I didn't have money to buy stuff, but I was just getting into places. I was just walking in. I was asking for access, and I was getting it done. And my mind broke from what I call the limitation I saw, back home, and that was an experience I will always treasure.
Treasured experiences in Treasure's mind. That's fantastic. Yeah, so I'm going to do a bit of a switch now and ask you, and I think it's a testament to your character, your journey getting married. So I wanted to tell us just a little bit about that, about your family and about that journey, taking the bold move to get into the next phase of life, because I think it also speaks to how you approach life and how you balance guidance and still take responsibility for your own decisions. Yeah, be sure.
Thank you so much for that question. And you see, I've always been guided, right? I've never had to do things just because I wanted to do it. And I've been guided by God's word. I've been guided by the witness in my spirit on steps to take. I've been guided by mentors as well, right? I've never been that person that wants to just do things on my own with the way I think it should be and all of that. And I think that's some of my superpowers, my ability to listen to God, my ability to listen to God's word, my ability to also have the right people in my space to listen to and model. Right. I think that's something that has helped me a lot. I have seen the trajectory of people's life and how they have moved from, chasing 1,000 to chasing 10,000 by virtue of being married. Right. I've also seen it in God's word that when you get married, you are not just getting married, but you're obtaining favor as well. It's a principle. I believe in the principles, right? But then I also needed the go ahead from God as well regarding it. So towards the beginning of 2025, I got a nudge in my heart that it was time to settle down. Now, settling down does not mean, I'm now focused on my family alone, but it's I've been married for about 7 months now. The amount of peace, the amount of stability, and the amount of focus I have had to the vision that God has given to me, I don't think I've had that in the last 3 years, right? And to me, that's the outcome of the instructions I had regarding my life. I knew I was going into another phase of responsibility. I knew the vision has to be nurtured. I knew that the vision has to be has to be well taken care of. Not like I wasn't doing that while, as a single man, but I knew that being single came with a lot of instabilities, right? Came with a lot of distractions, right? However, when I had it in my spirit that it was time to settle down, I didn't think of it twice. It was a faith journey, to be honest. Not like we had it all good. It wasn't even so glamorous. Honestly, my wedding was it was God's help. I'll be honest with you. We didn't even have the resources to do a lot of things. But then I knew it was time to move. I knew it was time to settle down. And I took it when I got the instruction. And that's how my journey has been as well. When God told me to start up the assembly, it didn't make sense because if I looked at my current situation as at then, it wasn't looking like the kind of position a man should be in to steward a vision like the assembly. It didn't look like it. However, I obeyed. And today I'm glad that I'm able to steward this vision and I'm growing every single day to be a good steward to this vision, right? So that's the same thing with marriage for me. And I'm glad, I'm grateful to God that I got married because marriage so far has made me see myself in a better light. It has made me gain some level of stability. It has also put organization to my life. This time around, I'm not just looking at because I have areas of strength and I have areas of weaknesses. And I have someone who can point out those weaknesses and also complement those weaknesses for me. And to me, that has been the outcome of it. And to be honest, it's not like it's been all smooth and loving. There's a lot of adjustment I have to make. There's a lot of learning I have to make. Sometimes my wife is correcting me on a matter and I'm looking at it. I'm having to go and pick up a book to read, having to watch a video to understand that problem or that challenge or that area of weakness so that I can get better at it. Not even for the vision, but for myself, for my own self, to have a better picture of my life, and for the vision ahead of me as well. So it's been an excellent journey, I must confess. It's not void of correction or void of patches, but it's been excellent in itself.
Fantastic. That's a lot to learn. A lot to learn about the balance of life. Quite a few young people may think that you have to focus all your energy in making money first, but that's not always the case. So that's fantastic decision. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'll just talk to you about the Africa SME Assembly happening on October 9th and what entrepreneurs should expect. So let's take a look at it. Yes. So we're going to be talking a bit about the Africa SME Assembly. And if you watched my share earlier, we talked about, we see on the website the opportunity for entrepreneurs to put their best foot forward, where funders meet capital and customers. So that's an interesting promise. You meet capital, you meet customers. The next assembly is on 9th October in Lagos. and you are invited to put your brand on the floor. There's a button to reserve your spot. Africa's business future starts here. So, Treasure, please tell us a bit more about what we're seeing on the screen. Just tell us a bit more about how the Africa SME Assembly started and where you are now and what you're promising us this October.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir, for that. And okay, so the Africa SME Assembly is my baby. I love the Africa SME Assembly so much. I am excited about it. I'm excited about the opportunity the Assembly brings for SMEs across the continent. I'm excited about the vision of the Assembly. I'm just going to try to share a bit of the vision of what we do at the Africa SME Assembly so that I can get as many persons who are yet to understand what we do, to understand it perfectly. All right. So let me say this. Firstly, we kicked off the Africa SME Assembly as an entrepreneurship support organization that's committed to building Africa's next generation of businesses, right? And we do this by equipping SMEs with the tools, the capital, and the strategic partnership and networks that is needed to grow and scale across the continent. When I say scale here, I mean building for long term, right? Now, this platform primarily serves as a platform that brings together entrepreneurs, please take note of this, investors, policymakers, corporate leaders, and ecosystem partners. And the goal is to foster innovation, collaboration, and sustainable business growth across the continent. So our vision at the Africa SME Assembly is simple. We aim to be the largest and the most impactful forum for stakeholders committed to building thriving entrepreneurship ecosystem across Africa. So our mission is to connect African businesses with the knowledge, with the talents, with the technology, with the funding opportunities and the trade network required for sustainable growth. And we've done this in the past. We've had a lot of engagement, partnership that has enabled that to happen, right? We have some initiatives. Our core initiatives is the African Business Accelerator. So the African Business Accelerator is an intensive program that equips entrepreneurs with practical business strategies, mentorship, and investment readiness. And we have it cumulating to a demo day where founders will pitch to potential investors. Then we have the annual Africa SME Assembly, which is coming up this year. But before I get to the annual SME Assembly, let me talk a bit about the accelerator. Currently, we are in the week 3 of the Africa African Business Accelerator, where 120 businesses sat down together from across 18 African countries, right, to be a part of this training that will last for 8 weeks. The goal is, how do we prepare these businesses with the right skills? How to prepare these businesses with the right exposure, the right knowledge to enable them to assess the right opportunities across the continent. And that's the goal, right? And so far, we've had an enormous amount of value. If you go on our social media, especially on LinkedIn, you get some feedbacks from entrepreneurs currently going through the Africa Business Accelerator, right? And then we have the assembly, which is a gathering that convenes entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, and industry leaders. Now, we do this through keynote sections, panel discussions, we have workshops, we have networking opportunities, we have deal rooms, and we have pitch competitions, right? And these sections are facilitated by renowned speakers, industry experts who provide practical insights for business growth. And this is really important to us because we're not just trying to get people together in the same room. No, we are trying to, this is the accelerator. We are trying to, beyond getting them into the same room, we are trying to enable them to meet each other. We're trying to give them that access point where they can meet each other and grow together, right? And that's the goal, right? And then we also have our year-round community where we have engagement activities, networking opportunities, which we are also inviting. It's actually free to join. We don't pay for that. We just free to join for free, right? So that's it. Um, it's been an interesting journey for us. When we kicked off, I'll be honest with you, my journey with the Africa SME Assembly, when I trace it, back to my journey as a young person, it reminds me of my parents that that had a business, lost their business because of inexperience, and that process of losing their business affected us greatly as young people, and we grew up in a bit of lack by virtue of that act. So imagine how the success of a business affects the generation unborn, even those currently, young people now, and even to their family as well. So the African Semi Assembly is a vision we have nursed, and we believe in it so much, and we think it's solving a critical problem across the continent. Thank you so much.
That's so fantastic, Treasure. Thank you so much for stepping forward to make this happen for Africa. I like the connection of ideas, the connection, the cross pull, the overlapping, the cross pollination, the network you're building of small business, small and medium enterprises, the mentorship structure, and the driver behind it, that this is personal for you, and you're willing to go all the way to make sure that the experiences of future generations are much better. We're going to have a final question just before we wrap up, and you share your final thoughts. You mentioned mentorship, right? Mentorship. These days, the hot conversation on the table is artificial intelligence, and more importantly, generative artificial intelligence. People these days go to Claude and say, help me with my business plan. Can I do this in Africa? And so on and so forth. Do we still need mentors, and why?
Thank you so much for that question. I particularly love that question because we are in an age and time where it seems like information is readily available. And so someone can just say, I want to learn how to build a business. And it goes on YouTube and types how to build a business and starts watching a video. And then he can come out tomorrow and say, I have the knowledge of building a business and I want to I've launched my business. And where did he learn business from? How to, from YouTube. And you see multiple of that happening because a lot of young people have started growing autonomous, feeling they can figure it out because of the availability of information, right? However, I've learned something very important in my journey, which is the fact that a lot of times you don't need to repeat a mistake to avoid the mistake. So I'll say that again. Sometimes if you make a mistake once, you will learn from it, and so that you can avoid it next time. But you don't need to make that mistake to avoid it. To a large extent, you can have someone who have made the mistake and help you to avoid that mistake by telling you about the mistake. And you, by virtue of that opportunity of learning, can avoid that mistake without making that mistake. And I think that's where mentorship comes in very handy, right? It's being able to see things from the sight of someone who has seen it. And one thing people don't know is that you can know something, but when you apply that thing, it's different. So you can know entrepreneurship, but when you now get into the business of entrepreneurship, it's totally different from what you knew or what you read on YouTube. And so at the bottom line is being able to identify people who have walked that path and say, okay, how do I learn from this person who have walked this path, right? And that's what mentorship does. So for me, mentorship is a very vital instrument for entrepreneurial growth across the continent. And that's why we had a structured mentorship plan for the African Business Accelerator, where we can keep founders in front of entrepreneurs who have some level of experience and wealth of exposure, and help these people see what they don't see. In the village, they say when an elder sits down in a chair, he sees what is higher than a young man who climbs an iroko tree to see. And so sometimes you want to sit down with those people and listen to them. And that's why I also appreciate you, sir, because beyond, you have quite a lot of experience. You've been able to find a way to communicate to those young people. And I'm glad that there are young people, like myself, who have gained from your wealth of experience. There's some level of understanding I have today. And when I take a line and draw it, I always link it back to a conversation I had with you, right? I always trace it back to a conversation I had with you. And imagine I didn't have an opportunity to speak with you. I remember earlier this year, I threw out this opportunity, the idea of the accelerator, and I threw it to you. And by the time I finished speaking with you, it was easy for me to now know how best to approach this. Imagine I had not done that. Imagine I just went on. I would have made a lot of mistakes, and that mistake would have cost us a lot. I'm sure, probably, but I'm glad I was able to engage with you. I was glad I was able to speak to you. In that way, I was able to understand better, avoid some of the loopholes that I didn't see, and then help me to even move faster. That's what mentorship does, and that's how important it is to the continent.
Fantastic. Someone has walked the path. Someone can help you avoid the mistakes they made. And knowing it in one's head is not the same as being able to execute. Thank you for sharing. Yes, so this is where we'll pause our conversation today. The conversation continues as always on Enyinaya Africa. I'd like to thank you, Ted, Professor Enyinaya David, for your work at the Africa Assembly, at Geographic, and at Growth Media. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of resilience, a lot of bootstrapping, a lot of growth. Thank you very much for today, and we'll see you another time.